Hi, welcome to our Fetter YouTube channel. Today, my 1984 1.6 liter Turbodiesel VW Rabbit. I am going to swap pumps on this car. In order to swap pumps, we need to time the motor. While I have the pump off, I'm going to go ahead and take my injectors out and pop test them. I've been having an issue with underfueling, so I'm just going to check all the bases. Off we go. I always start off with pretty much these three things. Gloves, because your skin is a permeable membrane. Parts tray, so you can collect things. Of course, a battery powered driver with a 1/4 inch drive attachment. This makes taking off small fasteners / every fastener on this job go way faster. Before I take any of the timing components off, I'm just going to go ahead and set it to top dead center. This isn't that critical, but it just makes doing stuff later way faster. So I'm looking here, I have a breaker bar here. Ideally, you might put the socket on the crankshaft if you have a friend helping. I don't have a friend helping, so this will get us close enough as far as how to leave off. So I got a pressure testing stand going on so we can pop test the injectors. Plug for myself, since I bought this piece of equipment. If you'd like me to pop test your injectors, drop a comment, we'll figure it out. There's diesel fuel in here. This is a pump. This displays pressure. That's an injector. It goes something like this. See? Now, I probably should put a mask on, and I probably will, because that's fine particulates of diesel just floating around the air that I am breathing. But anyway, that's what it looks like. I'm going to measure pressure over here and get a close-up of the spray pattern over there. Okay, so, wow, I start every sentence like that, don't I? I just pop tested those four. You saw just as well as me. I think this thing is a little tweaky in the sense that if you don't push it fast enough, it doesn't actually give the injector that pressure spike it needs. That said, they all popped just fine. The slow-mo is still pretty fast, but you can clearly see that it's just nice dispersed spray pattern. So there we go. We checked our injectors, and they pop test just fine. So we know our injectors are good as far as this fueling predicament goes. So that whittles us right down to the fuel pump. I'm gonna go ahead and swap in that other pump, and we'll see what we find out. So this little baby is a heat shield for your injector. And what that does is it seals the injector, so it's like a crush washer, but it also just keeps combustion gases away from the rest of it. There's 4 of them in there, and every time you take your injectors out, you need to replace these. Don't worry, they're like $2 a piece. So when you buy them, buy like 20, and then you'll be able to change your injectors 4 times, no sweat. Alright, real quick orientation as to how to time your engine. So the bottom of my motor is currently at top dead center, or at least it was. So that is this timing mark down there. You can see that notch. It needs to line up with the arrow that's on the transmission. So it doesn't look quite lined up. I'll have to retouch it just a little. So I'm gonna line that one up. Then you come over here to your fuel pump. You see there's a notch right there. There's this notch right there. And then on the inside of your wheel, there's a notch right there. So you line these up. You don't really need to line the pump up because it's gonna have some timing adjustment anyways. And then right here, this hole fits. I think I usually use a 12mm socket, but basically this is your timing pin. It'll lock this wheel in position relative to everything else. So when I time the engine, generally speaking, I start by setting the bottom to top dead center with the flywheel hole. Then I set my pump to top dead center and use the pin to hold it in place. And then you come up here, and for the valve train, some people like to use a big wrench on the cam lobes. That works fine. I use channel locks and go between the lobes, and just be super careful not to loosely twist it such that it creates metal filings. You just want to grip it really well. But basically, I come over here and I will twist the cam one way as far as it'll go with my current alignment tool, which is a file. Ironically, when I twist it all the way one way, that leaves about a 6/1000th gap on one side, which means if I get a 3/1000th shim and place it under one side or the other, I like to go on the back side. This cam will be exactly at top dead center. So that's what I do. I'm gonna go ahead and stick this shim under here. I'm gonna get the pin in there, gonna get the bottom aligned, and then you put your cam gear, so you put this pulley on loosely such that it can spin, because it doesn't actually matter where this pulley is so long as this is lined up perfectly when you put the belt on. the cam exactly where it's supposed to be, which is being referenced to the head itself. Then I have the crankshaft at top dead center, referenced on the transmission. And then the pump, this pin for me, for some reason, is always about a half tooth off. As in, if I rotated this wheel half a tooth, this would go in. If I went a full tooth, it would be too far. Regardless, it doesn't really matter because we're going to time the fuel pump to the rest of the motor in a second. So I think the fact that this locator is a little off is totally fine because our cam's good, our bottom's good. We'll time the pump, set the injection timing in just a second, and that will make the pump good. For right now, everything's on nice, so I'm going to go ahead and snug up this pulley, which is the last thing that hasn't been snugged, and then I'll be able to take this off and rotate the engine. It's a good note, right after I finish doing this, I am going to hand crank the motor over a few times. You should always do that when you time it, because if you did it wrong, you'll find out. The valves will meet the pistons, but at least they're beating the pistons at you turning the motor with a ratchet speed, which is fine. The pump timing is set by moving the pump with respect to everything else. See how this stays still, but I can rotate the pump? Since the engine spins this way, we know that moving the pump towards the motor is advancing the timing. When this wheel is turning, this is firing sooner, or turning it away from the motor slows it down. That's retarding injection time. It's probably going to be pretty close to the middle. I think today I'm shooting for a slightly slower timing setting. Previously I've done 0.95 millimeters, I've done 1.05 millimeters, and today I think I want to try something like 0.8 millimeters, see how that feels. Yeah, so it's a 12 millimeter. You're going to remove that from the back of the pump. Take a dial indicator and an adapter, you screw it into the pump, which gives you enough room to set the gauge inside of it like so. And so on these pumps you're actually measuring where the piston is inside the pump when you set timing. So I'm going to put this in here, and then I'm going to back the motor up. I'm going to run it in reverse until I see the gauge stop moving, and then I'm going to set this to 0. So this gauge reads in inches, so my target is 0.8 millimeters, which in inches is 0.0314. So right now we're reading 0.009. So this is a little too slow. I'm going to speed it up by pushing it back. In theory this should read this adjustment, but it's kind of guess and check. I'm going to push it, and then I'm going to move the engine back and forward again and recheck such that we get an accurate reading. Okay, so it's good. I got a consistent reading. It's worth, when you're doing this, doing it the first time, checking it, getting it close, doing it a second time. And when I'm saying doing it, I mean rotating the engine back until the zero is out, and then rotating it forwards to top dead center, right off your transmission. So the first time I do it, I got the rough adjustment. The second time I did it, I got the actual reading what I wanted and tightened the fuel pump so it couldn't move. And now this third time I did it to recheck everything, make sure nothing wiggled. So I'm gonna go ahead, tighten up the rest of the fuel pump bolts while making sure, and then I'll probably check it one more time. So it's 4 checks, but I mean, this is how your car runs, so it's worth your time. I think that took me 7 tries in total, between moving the pump just a little, tightening things just a little, rechecking things just a little. I now feel that it's dead on. Looks like I got 0.0317, which I'm gonna run with. As long as it's in the ballpark and I know exactly what it is, I'm happy with it. Timing belt's nice and tight. Pump timing has been set. So now the remaining bit of this is just reconnecting stuff. I gotta put my valve cover and schmutz back on. I'm gonna have to bleed my injectors, that'll take a second. And then very, very carefully, gonna start it up. Valve cover is on. I ran the electric fuel pump, so the pump here is full of diesel fuel. I'm gonna crank it over and bleed these lines. I have these rags stuffed in here because I'm gonna bleed them a bit extra. This pump was apart in a plastic bag for a while, and then I fiddled with it and now it's here. I don't know if there's dirt or something that's gonna come out of it as the first thing. So we're gonna turn it over a few times with the injectors on top of these microfibers. Then I'll pull them off and tighten everything like usual. Case in point, we're getting some fuel. Alright, so I mean, we finally got there. It seems like it is now running okay. That seemed about as difficult as probably it should have been, so that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and put some things back on. Pretty good. That was regrettable. We're testing a new pump, but we're also testing more retarded injection timing at the same time. It's a little dumb of me. I probably should have set it to exactly what the other one was at, because then we'd have a nice apples to apples comparison. But it runs. I mean, it runs just fine. So this pump and the electric fuel pump's off, so it must just not have been fully primed. It's now running quite nicely. Alright, that was cool. We're gonna give them names because even I am confused. There's the Giles pump, and then I guess we're gonna call it the Olly pump. So the Olly pump went on the car. I took the Olly pump with my first tune on it for a test drive, not shown, and it tried to basically immediately run away between shifts. Like first gear was like, "Wah," and then I took it out of gear to put it in second, and it was like, "What?" And I was like, "Ah!" I brought it back to the garage and retuned it and put a more conservative tune on it, meaning less fuel/power screw, more just idle screws/throttle position, and it ran great. Pump seems to work fine. I mean, it's definitely getting fuel. It's definitely not as well fueled as the Giles pump was, even though it has very similar modifications. That comes back to the fact that when I did the governor mod, I actually welded the cage after shimming it, because I was like, haha, I fixed it better now. From what I understand, welding and or fully shimming both springs in the cage when you're doing the governor modification will lead to really undrivable conditions. Like exactly what I saw, basically. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the weld I put on the cage, and then it should run way better, and I should be able to turn up the fuel. All of that should be peachy. In the meantime, I also got parts. I got a new pump head. I have an 11 millimeter pump head and I think a TDI rotor, so a higher lift rotor to put in the pump. That should make it downright saucy, but before we go and further modify the pump, I want to have some way of testing stuff. I'm going to start drag racing because there's like a cheap open track night kind of a thing. And so then we can compare eighth or quarter mile times between modifications, which will be sick. And I'll get to use the cars somehow, which is also sick. But please, leave a comment. Give your suggestions. And I'm going to keep working on this, see if I can get this pump to really be a beast and relay it for all of you to watch. So, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a good one.